I'm Anthony. In this one I'm going to be using Daz wood. It's a new clay from Daz, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how I make a pen pot. Now the first thing you'll notice when you first use Daz wood is that it's actually like no other clay that you probably used before. It's a little bit like cookie dough, so it is very crumbly. I've done a full review on this video on my YouTube channel, so if you're interested please go and have a look for that video. The actual pen pot itself, we just need to create the decoration that's going to go around it. So I'm going to use a mould from Prima Marketing, and like always I just pop the clay in, use my fingers and a rocking motion really to press that clay down into all of the amazing detail that is in your moulded piece. That shouldn't take you too long, and once you've then done that, you can be using a Dresden tool just to tuck the clay back inside the well of that mould, and this is going to make it easier to release at the end. Now if you like the contents of this video, please click on the like button, subscribe to my channel if you're new, and why not click on that notifications button as well. This will allow you to be notified of all brand new content that I upload to my YouTube channel. Right, continuing on, you'll notice that I have left an area at the bottom of my mould. It's not a mistake, it's basically going to be the height of our pen pot. So what I've done here, I've just got a piece of cardboard and done it into a roll. I've popped some masking tape on the inside, that make it easier to release when we finally take the clay piece off. So I'm just rolling that over there, and as you can see, that's just going to be the exact height of the cardboard tube, or former as it's actually properly called, because we basically form the clay around that tube. Once you've tucked all of the clay nice and neatly into your mould, then it's ready to pop it in the freezer. Put it in there for about 45 minutes. So take some of the clay from the packet, and using a non-stick mat I'm going to roll some of that clay out. Now if you find it too crumbly, then just add a little bit of water to it. So just press it down and knead it, and as you can see it is quite crumbly, and then what you're going to be using is a nylon rolling pin. Do not use a wooden one because you'll find that all of the wood clay gets stuck to it. So keep on adding enough clay until you make a large sheet of clay, all nicely rolled out. Don't worry too much about thickness as long as it's fairly even. So what I'm doing here, I'm using our cardboard former or our tube, and I'm just making sure that I've got enough on that sheet to go around that. So I'm just going to cut using a craft knife, and yeah, I do have to cut it twice because it is quite sticky. So push that just aside so you've got a nice straight edge to be working with. Then just grab your former and then carefully start to roll the clay around it. Where it actually joins, then what you're going to do is just hold it in place, and then again using your craft knife where the two actually join, again just cut down. Remove the clay that you've just cut, and then just using your fingers just press where those two pieces of clay actually join. Using your craft knife once again, what you want to do is just use the cardboard former as a guide, just to guide your craft knife around. So we're just basically cutting off and cleaning off one end of our pot. Keep on rotating and cutting the clay off until you've removed all the clay from one end. Don't worry about it being too rough at the moment, because in the next couple of steps we'll actually clean that up. Once you've done one end of the pot, then just simply turn it round and then do exactly the same by cutting all the clay away from the other end of our cardboard former. So using a Dresden tool or something similar, just neaten up the edges where those two bits of clay actually join around the cardboard former. Again, you don't have to worry about it being too neat because we will be cleaning that a little bit more further on in the video. With all the clay that you have left over, because it's air drying clay, make sure you put it back inside the packet and put it in an airtight container. As mentioned earlier in the video, I said you don't need to worry about where all the joins are, we're going to clean it up. That's what we're going to do now. So quite simply, just get some water, dip your finger into it and just run it along all the edges that look a little bit rough. Before you know it, you'll create a nice smooth finish on the clay, but just keep on adding water, keep on going over until you are happy with the finished look. So once you've finished smoothing off all of those rough edges, we're just going to reinforce our original cardboard former. So to do that, just roll up some cardboard slightly smaller than the original cardboard tube and then just pop it in the middle and then unwind it. You can add as many of those as you like, and this is basically going to reinforce that original cardboard former, because with that clay around it now, it is actually quite heavy and it could collapse in on itself. So now it's time to get our mould out of the freezer. So it's been in there for about 45 minutes to an hour, and that would be sufficient enough for the clay to be quite hard, and that makes it just really easy to release from the mould. But just because it's easy, you still do need to take care. If you rush, then you will knock pieces off of the actual casting. So it's probably best to flip it over and just gently ease that wood clay out. If you're unsure, then what I'd recommend is you actually place it onto your surface upside down and then just very gently just ease that mould off, and then you'll see the cast piece left on your bench. So as you can see, the Das wood, even though it has got lots of tiny wooden fibres actually inside the clay, does give a really crisp, clean impression of your moulded piece. Leave your cast piece and put it aside for about 5 or 10 minutes, and basically that's for it to start to defrost, and you'll see that's happened once the top of the casting starts to get a little bit shiny, just like it is here. That's when you can bring in the pen pot that we cast around that former. Okay, so just make sure that all of the cardboard within there is nice and secure, and that's going to really, like I say, reinforce the clay going around that former. Now it's the task of actually placing the piece actually on top of our pen pot. So you've got to be quite careful here, because obviously the cast piece has now thawed, and as you can see, some bits possibly will break off, but again, don't worry about it too much because it's easily placed back into position. So because the clay pot itself is still very moist, and also the piece that we've just cast is also pretty damp as well, you can quite easily just use a Dresden tool and just start to press it in, and even using your fingers, just gently just press that cast piece. Don't press too hard, because if you do, that will then squash all of the beautiful detail from your casted piece. So I'm going to use some water here and a paintbrush. I'm just going to pop that underneath, so it's not glue, it is just purely water adding, just to make the original piece of clay a little bit more mushy and therefore more sticky. Probably the most important thing here is just to make sure that you're really aware of where you're holding the pot. I've actually got my fingers inside of the cardboard former, because I then know that I won't mark any of the pot or any of the cast piece that I'm actually putting on the side. I'm just using a damp brush and going around the outer edges of the cast piece just to make sure there's a lot of moisture there, and it's just softening the clay. And as I said before, the more stickier the clay is, then the more likely your cast piece is to actually stick and, more importantly, stay on the pen pot itself. Now, because the mould I used was quite an intricate mould with lots of pieces and very fine pieces, that some pieces have fallen off, but don't worry. Again, I'm just adding lots of water to the pot itself and the cast piece, and I'm just going to place that over there, and I'm just going to use my fingers and just press it into position. If you want, you can use the Dresden tool just to push some of the pieces in a little bit more. So because that moulded piece was really delicate. Obviously it did fall off, and it can be expected, but don't, like I say, worry about it. Again, I'm just going to add a little bit more water to the back of that. Be really mindful where I actually hold that pot, so I don't want to mark it with my fingers, and I'm just going to apply a little bit more water to that just to soften that clay up. And the more stickier it is, as I said before, the less likely things will fall off it once everything has fully dried. Also, using a brush over the top will also smooth the surface a little bit more too. Now, another thing to bear in mind is that the longer you've actually left those extra pieces to actually stick onto your pen pot, the more time it has actually taken them to thaw, and the more time it's taken them to thaw, the floppier they're going to be. So they're probably going to be a little bit more tricky to actually handle. But again, just take your time and just lay it over exactly where you want it. Use a Dresden tool or similar just to position it, and then just go around just very carefully, just pressing it down using your fingers. Don't go too wild with your pressure, and then everything should be okay. If you think that you've missed a little bit where it's quite not that sticky enough to hold the piece, then again just use a paintbrush to do that, and then just go around the Dresden tool and just blend it into the original piece that was there, and before you know it, all of those elements that fell apart will come back cleanly together. So now is the time just to check over your pen pot and make sure everything is okay. Don't worry too much if certain parts of it are a little bit rough or a little bit textured. It obviously depends on what sort of look you want, but that can be treated even further on once the clay is fully dry. Now with this clay, it does take a full 7 days to dry on thicker pieces, so just bear that in mind. Be patient and put it aside. So about 2 or 3 days in, we're going to use that pot because it's dried sufficiently to take out the former. So now it can dry from both the outside and the inside. And we're just going to press that into a piece of clay that we have rolled out on our non-stick sheet. That's then going to give us the shape to actually cut out the base of our pen pot. So once again, just using a craft knife, just go round that part where it's impressed into the clay. So once you've cut that clay, then just remove all the excess and then just pop that back into the packet and then inside an airtight container. Just take off the base layer of our pen pot and then bring the actual pen pot back into play. So what we're going to be doing now is we're just going to be using either some PVA glue or some wood glue, and we're just going to pop that around the top of our pen pot. So just make sure you go all the way round. And then what we're going to do, we're going to lift our bottom part up and then just pop that on top of the glue. Use your fingers again just to go round the edges. Just be mindful not to press in the middle of that piece you just put in, because you will make a hole in it. So just going around the outside using your fingers, just start to smooth that clay into the actual walls of the pen pot itself. So once you've smoothed that clay as much as possible just using your fingers, what we're going to do is to bring back in some water. So again, just pop your finger in the water and then just drag the clay downwards, and that's going to help blend it into the walls of the almost set clay. So just keep on going around there. No need to rush. Like I say, the clay does take 7 full days to fully dry. So just keep on going around there until you're happy. For more detailed areas, then just use a Dresden tool, but make sure it's damp and then it's not going to drag the clay too much. So if you wish, you can also use a paintbrush. Obviously make sure you just dip it in the water there, and that will help blend the wet clay from the end of that pen pot into the slightly set walls of the pen pot itself. So just keep going around there. The more time you spend now, then the less time you'll spend actually sanding the clay at the final stage. So again, just using your fingers, just keep on going around there, just make sure they are damp, and it's easy then to blend that clay, the wet and the dry, into each other. So when we actually made the pot on the inside, because obviously we couldn't blend in the clay where it actually joined, what we need to do is just fill the little gaps on the inside of the pot. So what we've done here is we just grabbed some clay, a very small amount, and we've added quite a lot of water, and we're just mixing it up so it's almost like a mush. This is creating basically a clay slip, which is basically like a glue, but it's also like a wood filler in this case. So we're just going to go in there where the two ends of that clay cylinder come together and just fill in all of the tiny cracks. You can apply that with the paintbrush. I found that was the easiest. The Dresden tool didn't really push the clay into those little cracks, and just keep on going around there until you're happy with the overall finish. So after 7 full days, and possibly longer depending how thick your clay actually is, you can start to smooth it even more using some sandpaper. So use a really fine grit sandpaper, and then just go in all directions just as you would when you're sanding a piece of wood, because this is wood clay and surprisingly it does act exactly like wood. So yes, you can sand it down, and yeah, you do actually get sawdust once you sand it down. So just keep on going back and forth until you are happy with the finish. At this stage you can also chisel. Yes, I did say chisel the wood clay as well, and it acts exactly like wood does when you chisel it. So if you're into that sort of thing, you can add a little bit more detail to this piece if you should so wish. So using the sandpaper on a block, I'm just going to go on the top part, or the opening of our pen pot, and just make sure that's a little bit smoother there. So just keep on going all the way around until you're happy with the finish. So where I added the casted pieces on top of the pen pot, obviously there was a little bit of roughness there that I wanted to smooth down. So I've now taken the sandpaper off the sanding block, and I'm just using it with my fingers just to really go in and smooth off all of the surface in between all of those cast pieces that we stuck on. Again, there's no rush, just take your time. If you need to, then use something like a ball tool or something and just wrap a little bit of the sandpaper around that, just to get into all those little nooks and crannies within all of that cast pieces. Also at this point, you'll notice that because that clay, when we originally put that cast piece on, was really sticky, nothing is lifting off. So it's almost formed into one piece. So it's nice and strong. So as well as sanding the outside of the pot, don't forget to also do the inside of the pot. So I've just folded the sandpaper back on itself. I'm just using my fingers there to go inside and just smooth all of those walls inside the pen pot as well. So once all the sanding has been done, I'm going to add a little bit more detail, and I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing. Now, if you don't know what dry brushing is, please go and search my video for dry brushing on my YouTube channel. But basically what it is, it's applying hardly any paint to the brush and then literally just flicking that over the cast area, and that will pick up on all of the high points of the casting and just add a hint, and I do mean a hint of colour, but it's just enough to accentuate all of that beautiful detail in the mould. Just keep on doing that until you're happy. So you can see here there's hardly any paint actually going on there, but it is just picking up on those high points, and it just makes it look dare I say, a little bit more woody than it actually was. So just keep on going around there. Dry brushing is a technique where the more times you go over the same area, then obviously the more coats of paint you are applying, but you'll never ever achieve a solid colour if you are doing dry brushing correctly. So after all of the dry brushing with the acrylic paint, I put the project aside for about half an hour so that acrylic paint completely dried. And as you can see, I also did a little bit of dry brushing on the top and the bottom of the pen pot, again just to accentuate the actual shape of it and add a little bit more interest. So after the dry brushing came the varnish, and I didn't use a special craft varnish here at all. Because the clay itself is made of fine wood fibres, I thought, do you know what, I'm going to give it a go, and so I did. All I used here was normal clear DIY wood varnish, and to my surprise it came up beautifully. In total I applied 3 coats, leaving about half an hour between coats. The more coats you put on, obviously the glossier it gets, but there's lots of other different types of wood varnish out there. It could even be one with a little bit of colour in if you should so wish, but it is going to work on this particular type of clay. The one thing that has really surprised me about using DAS wood is that the project you actually make is so light. What's also great is that if you accidentally drop it, it won't smash like other clays from DAS. Well, that just about wraps it up for this particular video. If you have liked the contents of this video, please consider clicking that like button, subscribe to my channel if you're new, and why not click on that notifications button as well. This will allow you to be notified of all brand new content that I upload to my YouTube channel. Right, well until next time, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you again real soon.